Hey everyone, my name is Mitch Attalese. This is my beautiful wife, Wendy Attalese. And we are going to start a podcast called Be a Blessing, because Be a Blessing for us is kind of our mission for our lives personally. It's our mission for the business that I own called Attalese Insurance Agency. And so we want to take this idea of be a blessing and talk about in different ways that we can add value to whoever's watching or listening to this podcast on how different concepts from parenting to finance to entrepreneurship, different things that we've learned over the years of how we can share that information. Hopefully it'll be a blessing to you and you can use it to further your career, your parenting, your finance, different areas of your life. We want to be a blessing to you. So we're going to talk about some things. My wife's going to do a great job of asking some questions, keeping us on task. This is the first time we've ever done this, so if it seems really awkward at first, that's probably because it is.
Thank you to all 4 of our viewers, which are our parents. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. So this first episode is essentially going to be why we started this and a little bit about our background. So
basically my role is Oprah. I interview.
Do I get a car?
No, you get a car. You get a car.
Who's getting the car? Frank. Wait. We got producer Frank behind the scenes, and you can't see what's happening here, but this dude has our office looking like a full-fledged real studio. So I'm so pumped. I'm a little nervous.
It is kind of awesome.
I don't normally get nervous, but I'm kind of nervous because it looks so official right now.
It is. So basically what I want to know is be a blessing. That is our life's mission, but it can be a little misleading because I think some of you think you can call this line right now and ask for prayer. I mean, we'll pray for you.
We got some prayer cloths we're going to be selling for $14.99. I'm just kidding. No prayer cloths.
But explain that mission. Explain what that looks like and explain why I kind of fought you on this. Yeah. I did. I fought you and I was like, I don't think that's a good podcast title. I didn't agree with it.
So here's why we were a little bit gun shy on the podcast title of Be a Blessing, is because it has a really religious context, which is perfectly fine because both of us have a religious background. We're both Christians. We both are followers of Christ. So we don't have an issue with the religious context. This isn't going to be a religious podcast. There may be elements of it that are going to have some religious tones, but I just need all of you to know that are watching this that I love Jesus, but I cuss a little bit and I drink. So there you go. It may, for the super religious people, it may be off-putting. I'm going to try not to cuss too much in this because I don't want to turn away any viewers, but I love the Lord, and we are going to talk about faith in some aspects, but the reason Be a Blessing, here's why we settled on that term, is because we wanted something that was going to be bigger than ourselves. Like if we're going to have an ongoing, continual basis of ideas and thoughts and conversation, it needs to be ongoing. Be a blessing. That idea really encompasses all of life. So it's not I feel like we're not going to run out of conversation about how can we be a blessing. We can be a blessing to our community by highlighting businesses here locally. We can highlight charities and nonprofits. Locally, be a blessing to them and draw attention to them. We can talk about entrepreneurship and business ownership and things that have worked for us and what's made us successful in those avenues. So,
everyday issues, postpartum depression, talking about grieving, talking about things that you realize you're not alone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other people that feel like you feel.
Simon Sasnick talks about having an infinite mission. And so for us, Be a Blessing is an infinite mission for our lives and for our business. And hopefully for this podcast, that it's never ending. You can always look for ways to be a blessing. If you truly buy into the idea of, man, if every decision I made was based upon the idea of how will this bless somebody else, and kind of tapping into that religious connotation, the Bible talks about God blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others. That's really what this is about. I want to be a blessing I want to add value to your life by the things that I've learned. I've learned a lot of lessons in life, and I want to be able to share those. And not only that, I want to reach out to people who have been successful in our local community and let them share what's worked for them. And whoever's listening or watching, hopefully that'll be a blessing to you. You can take that information, use it, and better your life.
But it's important that you understand what you're going to get here is not going to be the vanilla version of the stuff that's regurgitated over and over again. We have a vision of not always saying the right things at the expense of the real things.
That's fancy.
And, I know.
Real fancy right there. That's good.
And so I need you to understand a lot of the times it's going to make you uncomfortable. It makes us uncomfortable. I mean, I'm still going through a lot of growth, a lot of revelation. And some of the things we might say, you're watching this podcast and your face is normal. We're going to say something and it's going to go to stank and so understand that our goal is not to have a broad audience. This is not for everybody. We understand that. This is going to be for the people who are really, really looking for growth and looking for the nitty-gritty down to how do I do this? How do I face the hard things? And how do I forge on?
Yeah. So, that being said, since whoever's still listening at this point,
Thank you.
let's talk a little bit about our background. So, first and foremost, what I think a lot of times when we talk about our background, what catches most people by surprise is the fact that Wendy and I were actually high school sweethearts.
Yeah, we were 15.
Yeah, started dating at a very early age. And
we've been together 24 years.
Almost a quarter of a century.
Been together and married next month, end of May, 17 years.
I'm going to have to agree with that because I don't do math in my head very well. So yes, 17 glorious years. And so a lot of people are like, man, that's awesome. How did that happen? How were you able to do that? And all I can say is Wendy's a really patient woman, primarily. And I'm a very attractive man. So outside of that, I don't know what the answer is.
So humble. That's what got me, is that humble spirit.
No, it was a bumpy journey. And a lot of the lessons that we learned along the way in that journey, I'm hoping that we'll share some of that. But yeah, high school sweethearts. We got two children, 2 boys who are full of life, full of energy, have a lot of personality, and are polar opposites in terms of personality.
It's hard to believe they're related.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about those guys and what we've learned as parents and a lot of our failures as parents and a lot of our wins as parents. But yeah, so married almost 17 years, been together 24. We're from a little town called Pine Prairie, which is about 45 minutes south of here. I moved to Pine Prairie when I was in the 10th grade from Ville Platte, Louisiana. And the first time Wendy ever met me, I was riding a horse, smoking a cigarette, thinking I was the Marlboro Man. What did that make you like? What kind of an introduction to, like, when you saw that stallion on a stallion smoking a cigarette,
I truly thought
that was your future, baby?
I thought that ain't gonna get off the ground.
The only thing I was missing was a cowboy hat. I think I had everything else going. But so dated through college, kind of off and on through high school, and I was, typical male. Was like, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, didn't know if I wanted to be in a relationship or not. Finally, she turned the tables on me at some point and said, look, I had enough of this. I'm breaking up with you. That was after I think we had gone through 4 or 5 breakups that I had initiated. And so when she did that, flipped the table on me, it made me get serious about the relationship. And we got back together and were engaged and then married within 5 months.
Because when I flipped the tables, I was like, either you want to be with me or you don't. There's no question. You're a man. You could be in Afghanistan fighting right now. It's time to make a decision. And when you do pop the question, get ready to get married the next weekend, because I'm not going to rock a ring for no year or 2 years. It's not happening.
So we did that. We got married pretty quickly.
Oh, it makes it sound like you really wanted to marry me. Oh,
I did.
I just heard myself out loud.
Yeah. She threatened me.
I did.
Yeah, she's so beautiful. But listen, right out of the gate, though, we faced challenges. Another interesting part of our story is the morning of our wedding. So the night before, me and my buddies who were in the wedding, we went and played pool in Lafayette. I was super religious back then, so I had a very rigid lifestyle, and playing pool was kind of like on the parameters of being wild. So we were playing pool in Lafayette, get back home, about 2 a.m, I got a phone call. My grandfather had cancer, had been battling cancer, and literally died the morning of our wedding. And so what a crazy event. But here's what's cool about that story is I had talked to my grandfather about 2 weeks prior and said, look, if something were to happen and you die, do we continue with the wedding? And he told me, he's like, no, you go ahead and you do that wedding, you get married, no matter what happens. So thankful that I had the conversation because it actually happened the morning of our wedding. Yeah. Probably one of the weirdest days of my life. It's like one of the happiest times and a really sad time, having lost a grandfather who I was pretty close to at the time. So really awkward day, but a beautiful day nonetheless.
Yeah. So briefly explain to the last 17 years of employment for you.
Okay, so
briefly,
we got married. I was living in New Orleans at the time. I was attending a seminary down there in the undergraduate program, and Katrina hit in 2005 down in New Orleans. The school was damaged heavily. We didn't know what was going to happen, if they were going to continue school there or move the campus. So we moved to Pineville, Alexandria, Louisiana, so I could finish up at LC. Got a degree in religion and got employed at some local churches, did church work for about 10 years. And it was a combination of youth ministry, young adult ministry, music ministry. I love music. And you can find some music things online. Matter of fact, the music that we intro this podcast with is some of my original music. Did some music ministry, did administrative work. And after about 10 years of doing church work, had some financial goals that I didn't think I was going to be able to accomplish doing vocational ministry type employment, and decided that I wanted to go to more of a volunteer scenario in church, and talked to some friends who were in the insurance industry and decided I would try to become an insurance agent. So I took the path of going work for a State Farm agent, did that for about 18 months, had the opportunity to open a State Farm, and owned a State Farm for about 3 years, had a good run with State Farm, but then thought that the better path for me ultimately was to open up an independent agency. We did that at the beginning of a pandemic year in 2020, launched a scratch agency, and had one of the most successful years of business ever in the middle of a pandemic. So currently own At-Lease Insurance Agency, and we're right here in Alexandria, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful transition from ministry to State Farm to At-Lease Insurance Independent Agency ownership. So that's where we are. Learned a lot of lessons along the way of what to do and what not to do, what works. But here's what's really great is what really works is really simple. And that's a lot of the things that we'll talk about aren't going to be these huge, big concepts. They're going to be really simple, basic concepts. And it's just the fact of executing on a day-to-day basis that makes you successful.
Yes.
And what I've learned is when you can do that in every aspect of your life, from your faith, your fitness, to your finances, to your vocation, your relationships, you execute on a day-to-day basis the action plan that gets you to your goals. It will transform every facet of your life.
It's not complicated.
No, not at all.
It's pretty simple, but it's not easy.
Not easy.
That makes sense.
It's simple, but not easy.
Yeah.
The concept is simple, but the execution daily is what's hard, because so many people don't have the discipline. They sell themselves short. They sell their will to win.
And they have a price on it. Yep.
They settle. So you have some questions here?
I do.
Let's tackle some of these questions.
First thing is, briefly explain to us why you chose the song at the beginning of the podcast, because it's an interesting, it's melodically, it's musically, explain.
I think the song that we've chosen, we haven't officially chosen the song yet. Matter of fact, producer Frank hasn't even heard the song. He may thumb down and say, no, we're not doing that. In the event we choose this song, the song's called Protest Me. And I wrote that song with a band called Social Recall a few years back. It was kind of like a Christian rock band. And Protest Me is about, really, it kind of foreshadowed the culture we live in now. and didn't even realize it. So I wrote that song probably back in 2008. And it's this idea of just people always having something to push back on, protesting. And I think protest is healthy. I think it's good. Obviously, our country was founded on protest. So I like the idea of protest, but that song in particular, I think for this podcast, I like the way that it sounds. It's upbeat, it's lifting. It's one of the more difficult melodies I've ever written. It's one of the harder ones to sing. And I think the idea of protest and pushing and questioning and fighting and ideas, I think fits kind of what we'll be doing here. There's times where there may be protests between you and I. We don't agree on something or our guest. And I think those dialogues and those conversations are good and healthy.
That was very eloquent. I picked that song because it was free and we didn't have to pay royalties to nobody. And because that's the kind of song I want to hear in my beats when I'm running. So I thought, hey, like something to grab your attention and be like, listen to this podcast.
Anyway, it's on SoundCloud if you want to hear it. I have a lot of music on SoundCloud, from country to straight demo acoustic stuff to really heavy rock. If you're interested, Mitch Attaley's music is, check it out.
All right. Second thing is
music. Check it out.
You did expound on this already, but what is your major goal in formulating this podcast? What inspired you and what do you hope to accomplish by starting this podcast?
Well, first of all, you and I listen to a lot of podcasts. We're kind of podcast junkies. We listen to a lot of Audible books. Audible, is that right? Audible books, yeah. And so every day I listen to guys like Ed Milet, Andy Frisella, listen to Tony Robbins, kind of old school. I mean, we have a plethora of folks that you listen to. Rachel Hollis, and who's some of the other cool ladies?
Andy Stanley.
He's not a lady, but yeah, Andy Stanley.
No, but
John Maxwell, not a lady also. But we listen to a lot of podcasts. And so I just thought, how fun would it be? I like to talk. I feel like it would be a fun venture to try to take what we listen to that's on a very national level and bring it to a more local level to our community. Not that half of you, hopefully some of you that are listening or watching right now probably know us and you're our friends or family.
Hey, Mom.
Yeah, hey, Jamie, good to see you, buddy. But at some point, hopefully a few more people within our community start paying attention to what we're doing. And I would love to, my vision is to take what's happening nationally with some of those guys and some of those podcasts that we listen to and bring it down to a local level to where it's more tangible, it's more realistic, and we can highlight some very successful people that maybe you've never heard of, like the Attaleses. Like I think we're very successful. We're successful parents. We have a successful relationship and marriage. We've had successful business ventures. So I want to highlight people maybe you've never heard of locally who are doing the things that the national podcast folks are talking about. But
just
man,
shrinking it
it's
down
happening right here. And we've benefited. We've been here since 2006. We moved here in 2006, and we've gotten to know some really, really talented people. And we have those resources at our disposal, and to be able to introduce them to our community that we build, hopefully over time through the podcast, that excites me.
Another question is, of all these successful people, all these personalities, all these people who are available, why the heck did you choose me and ask me to do this podcast with you? So
I got to be honest, and Wendy knows this, she wasn't my first choice. She was my second choice. But that being said,
the side chick.
She was a side piece. No. Only because I didn't think she would do it. So it wasn't something that I thought she would be interested in doing. So there's another successful entrepreneur, business owner that I reached out to initially that I thought was a good fit. And hopefully at some point we either have that person on this podcast or we do some other podcast with them. Mm-hmm. But like entrepreneurs, very busy and just wasn't able to commit on a week-to-week commitment. Totally understandable. So I hope to have that person highlighted here in this podcast, or maybe we do some side venture highlighting some specific things. But whenever that kind of didn't work out, I started thinking, okay, well, like if I'm not going to do it with that person that I originally chose, like who would I want to do it with? And I was drinking one day, had a few cold beers, and I was like, man, Wendy and I have some really good conversations in the evenings, so maybe it would be fun to do this with Wendy. We know each other really well. We've practiced the art of conversation over the years intentionally. She's good looking. We're married. We have children. We have a lot of things that we can talk about that's worked for us.
A lot of common denominators.
A lot of chemistry. A lot of things going on here that hopefully translate well on camera. So that's why I think and maybe that was some of God's working. I don't want to get too. Again, we'll have some religious tones here, but maybe God did that on purpose. Maybe you should have really been my first choice, but it took that happening for me to realize, man, I got an awesome business entrepreneur partnership here, family, a lot of life that we've lived together over the years that we can share of what didn't work, what did work. And it's probably going to be a lot more interesting, especially when we don't agree. People are going to really want to see that.
You're going to see that. We are not always, Team Mitch or Team Wendy. Sometimes we on
team
our
athletes.
own team. We on our own team.
We're shooting for team. Mitch is always team athlete.
But at the end of the day,
somebody.
At the end of the day, we have each other's back, and we are absolutely, deeply, madly in love and
deeply, madly, truly.
See right there.
Was that Savage Garden?
It's won my heart.
Savage Garden.
All right.
Oh, we got about a minute left.
I got too many questions.
Well, look, man, we're 19 minutes in. I think I forgot to start timing it out the gate. I don't want to bore. Whoever's left at this point is totally committed.
They are totally committed. Thank you.
So thank you for sticking around up to this point.
All right. There is a thing that you've asked me on all the podcasts that we're going to have to never share my questions that I'm going to ask you in advance. Mm-hmm. Never.
Yeah.
It's an ultimate surprise when we're on air. Why is that?
Well, I think it takes away the organic chemistry of it. I want to be able to have a real conversation that's not predisposed. And I'll tell you where I learned this from. Regis, remember Regis and Kelly Lee? Or Regis and Kelly?
Regis Philbin?
Yeah. So I watched a documentary on them, and they never spoke to each other until they got on stage that morning. So they wouldn't call each other, they wouldn't see each other, they had no idea what they were coming into. They kind of probably had some sort of an idea that they discussed, but they never pre-discussed that plan. They got on stage, and what you saw was a true organic conversation / chemistry. So I kind of took that idea, and I know that for me, like if I'm pre-planned, it's going to feel very generic and I won't flow as well. So I'm better just talking how just letting it flow. So that's why. Regis and Kelly and letting it flow.
Ladies and gentlemen, the preparer and the planner inside of me just died a little bit. I don't know how I'm going to fare with this.
I'd be fine. As long as I don't drop too many F-bombs, we'll be fine.
Earmuffs, mama, earmuffs.
All right, so we've talked a lot and really didn't add a whole lot of value. We just talked a lot about us. We talked a lot about why we want to do this. Somebody that's stuck around for 21 minutes, maybe 22 at this point, what's one thing of value, and I'm going to flip the script here, I'm going to ask the question, what's one thing of value that whoever's still listening, still watching, that you can leave them before we end our first episode of Be a Blessing with Mitch and Wendy, which is the name, by the way, Be a Blessing with Mitch and Wendy. What can you leave somebody here with a value?
I think it was what I introduced initially. I really value the friends that I have that don't try to always say the right things at the expense of my feelings, because it's not serving me. Sometimes the truth is ugly and you have to work through it and you got to process it. And for a minute there, you're going to be upset with that other person, but the message is the message. So I would always say stick to what's real over what seems or appears right at the time. And in this world that we live in today, that's not always the easy thing. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
Good advice. So sometimes the message can be difficult, but it has a lot of truth. I know that I tend to be someone who brings hard truths into conversation sometimes when it gets pissed off at me. but I know that she probably, and vice versa, she does the same to me. But that's more my personality. I'm a very aggressive type personality. So I'm glad that she can appreciate what I have to offer in our relationship.
Absolutely.
So look, hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We're going to try to, our goal is to do this once a week, have a new podcast episode once a week. Be a blessing. We're going to highlight some local entrepreneurs, business owners, some local nonprofits. We're going to highlight some of our struggles and failures, some of our wins, and hopefully at the end of the day, we'll take things that have brought value to our life and transpose it to you. Be a blessing with Mitch and Wendy. Tell your friends, tell your mama and them. Y'all listen, y'all watch, share it. We appreciate you guys. Producer Frank, you're the man, brother.
Have a good one.